This episode of The Turning Shed is brought to you by the Walnut Log Studio and Supply. Nova Woodworking, smart tools, powerful solutions.
Hampshire Sheen, a fine hand-blended wood turner's wax for a finish that is quintessentially British.
The Classic Nib, your source for Bock nibs and other fine pen-making supplies. Special episode sponsor, Beyond Wood Products, maker of Shock Wood, Shock Res, and Shock Extreme. Welcome to The Turning Shed. My name is Jeff, and today we're going to take a piece of Fade 5 24 primary Shock Extreme resin, and this is manufactured by Beyond Wood Products here in St. Louis. We're going to take a piece of this and we're going to turn a sphere. Because of the amount of color in this piece, I don't know if you can see that, it should end up being really cool looking. I like turning spheres out of things of this nature, or using offcuts of burl or highly figured wood, because it gives me the opportunity to use something that was probably going to be too small for anything else. I considered scrap, I guess. You know, the corners off of that big piece of burl that you use to turn a highly impressive platter, you can now use those to make much smaller, round, interesting, cool looking pieces that can go into a bowl or get put onto a stand, and they're really a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun to turn. Now, there's lots of ways that you can go about turning a sphere, from as simple as making a pair of wooden cup holders. One would be on the headstock, one would be on the tailstock, and they would hold your sphere, or your kind of half egg shape, as you round it. Or you could even go as fancy as a purchased metal sphere turning jig. Now, I looked into those before, and it's more money that I want to spend on a tool that can only be used for one purpose. But if you need the precision that gives you for either production turning or something that you got to nail a size every time, maybe a jig would be better for your purposes. For me, for what we're doing, this is a simple way that anybody can turn a sphere, at least a small size sphere, on a standard lathe using standard hand tools, and just find yourself a cool looking piece of material and get to it. So if nothing else, stick around, because this really is a lot of fun. The first thing we need to do is get this turned into a cylinder shape. This is the first step of the process. I've got it chucked up between a step center and a live center, and we're going to use a standard spindle roughing gouge to make it a rounded cylinder shape. Now, because it's acrylic, because it gets very stringy, and because of the odor that can be caused by working with this particular material, I won't be doing a lot of talking, because I'm going to have my trend on, and just to protect my face and lungs, protect my eyes. It's what I usually use when I turn, but there won't be a lot of talking. So during this section at least, I'll play you some music. This is what we're going to be working with, and this is why I like making spheres. You can take something that's as cool as this and turn it into a neat piece. They're nice to just sit around, look at, hold in your hand. I don't know. There's an appeal to being able to make a sphere. The downside to working with this product is because it is an acrylic resin, there's an awful lot of strings, so I might need to stop and clean off the machine or the cameras or something. So, as I said, this episode has an episode sponsor. It is Beyond Wood Products, and the gentleman that I work with there is Tom Stone. He is a local manufacturer here in St. Louis, and makes everything. He makes all of the cool resins and hybrids and things of that nature. Some of the pieces that you see that I do for sale, the product comes from Beyond Wood Products. And this, as I said earlier, this particular product is Fade 5 24 primary. So there are 24 color variations of primary colors, all mixed and swirled into this blank. And I don't know what his process is. He will not tell me, but in my opinion, Beyond Wood Products is the best acrylic, the best resin, the best hybrid products that I've ever turned. They're a little bit more on the hard side, so you need really sharp tools, you need to sharpen often, but because they're a little bit more on the hard side, you can do things with them that you cannot necessarily do with some of the other purchased acrylics and resins that are out there. Anyway, enough with the love fest for Beyond Wood Products. I think you will see some pretty impressive results if I don't screw up, and yeah, you just might like what he does. So we'll keep going. The next step here is we need to make this cylinder shape into as close to a rounded shape as we can get it from this position on the lathe using basic turning tools. And the easiest way to do this is by measuring and marking. So I've got a set of dial calipers, and what I want to do is I want to measure the widest point of my cylinder. I want the widest point to be marked, because this point here is pretty much going to be the size, the overall size of my sphere. So I've already got one dimension established. All I have to do is to match that dimension this way and then round things out. Okay, this is about a 3.5 inch piece of stock that we're working with. So the center of that is 1 3/4. We're going to go ahead and mark that. I need to know where my center is. Remember, like I said, this thickness here, this thickness is, I want that to be as close to the final shape and final size of my finished sphere as possible. So I want to scribe this just with a pencil. Depending on what you're using, you might want to use a Sharpie or an ink marker or something so that you can see it. But I'm going to try really hard not to turn that away at this time. We determined that the overall thickness is it's about 2.5 inches. So I want to go with 1 1/4 inches as my center point on the calipers and mark right there. I'm going to mark here, and I want to mark about here. Okay. Now I'm going to give myself a little more room to mess up. Ultimately, I want to get as close to these measurements as I can, but because I'm doing this by hand, the first stage of this process, it's probably not going to happen. I'm going to be closer to these marks here, and I'm still going to have to turn off my center stubs because we're not going to go into the chuck. So we're going to put the mask back on, we're going to get the music going in the background, and we're going to use a spindle gouge to turn away some of this material and start rounding this out. Now, I will tell you, if you are using one of the jig systems, you kind of have to do these setup steps anyway. So again, if you don't need that precision and you don't want to spend the money on a jig system, there's no reason why you still can't go ahead and learn how to turn the sphere. So yeah, let's go ahead and keep going here. Okay, one of the big downsides to using an acrylic resin of any kind is the potential for chipping, cracking, popping, things of that nature. I had a catch, and it was my fault. I was using my round carbide, and instead of trimming back the part that I'm going to cut off, I didn't, and I was rounding with the carbide, and I caught on not only the sphere, but I caught on the collar, and that caused some chipping and tear out. Right there is a chip. I was able to turn away everything else. The sphere is going to be fine. And then what happened was the stem center has a spring-loaded center punch, which keeps things from going horribly wrong. But because of that, the sphere jumped off center, and I think that's what caused the chipping. But we are recovering. We are moving on. I am admitting that it was absolutely my mistake, and you know, just one of those things. I won't get too close. Well, I got too close. I had a catch, and that's what happens. But this is wood turning, and it happens, and I want you to see that even though we're making YouTube videos, we goof things up sometimes too. So you can see it's only one small chip, and I'm going to be able to turn past that and not lose much overall size of my piece. But we're going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to turn these these collars down a little bit more. Oh yeah, the other thing you can see is this stuff, all acrylics, everything I've ever turned is very stringy, and because of the way Tom makes his, it's a little bit harder, but it makes fabulous ribbons. Downside to having fabulous ribbons is they get wrapped around everything. So yeah, you got to stop often and clean your machine. And I really would recommend that when you need to clean, turn off your machine. Don't try to do it blind. Don't try to do it with the machine on. I do not know if it's possible, but I would think that you could get tangled up, get your finger tangled up in a bunch of this stuff and get sucked in between your workpiece and the tool rest, and that would be it would be bad, it would be painful, and it could be potentially serious. You know, you could really screw up your finger by doing something like that. So when you need to clean off the strings, turn off your machine. Just turn it off. Keep it safe. Alright, as you can see, I've worked past that chip out section. There's still just a little bit right there, but I know I'm going to take down this side far enough that that's not going to be an issue. Since I'm turning between centers, I really don't want to part this off on the lathe because it could jam when one of these sides come off. So I'm going to head over to the bandsaw real quick and knock these nubbins off because I don't need them anymore. I don't need a hole in the center anymore. Actually, I think I'm going to turn this, I'm going to round this just a little bit more with the tool, and then I'm going to take these ends off. And we'll come back with the next step of this process. Okay, I have my not round, not egg shape here, and I'm ready to move on to the next step. And the next step consists of holding this. This is the way it was oriented while we were turning between centers. Now, what I need to do is I need to be able to hold it this way where that pencil mark was, so that I can start rounding off these sides. But in order to do that, I'm going to be holding it this way, okay? And the piece will be turning towards me this way. You can see that this is an end, the other end is facing me. It's going to be turning this way. So I need to be able to, I know this dimension, I need to be able to figure this dimension. So the first thing I need to do is make a wooden jam chuck that my roundish shaped piece can fit into. So we're going to move down to the other camera real quick, and I'll show you how to do that. I've got a piece of sycamore here in the chuck. It's chucked up, it's just a regular sycamore, piece of scrap, and it is bigger than my roundish shape. Not by much. I don't have a lot of wiggle room. I think I got just enough to do what I need to do. And what I need to do is I need to hollow this out in a roundish shape that this will fit into. But I only want to go to about there. I don't want to go on to dead center. I don't need to hold it at dead center yet. So this diameter of wood should be plenty enough to hold this piece while I go to the next step. And what the next step is going to do is, as you recall, my pencil line was centered here, so this is an established diameter. This is a diameter that I want as my finished size, or at least as close as possible. This diameter is not yet determined, but this diameter is going to be based on this diameter. And I'll show you how to do that. It sounds a little complicated, but it really isn't. Once you see what I'm doing, you'll completely understand. It's very simple to do. So the next step now is to move the tool rest in and to hollow this piece out so that I can hold my sphere snugly, and I mean tight, because it's truly a jam chuck. I need to jam this into the wood because I don't want it to jump out during the next step. Alright, because this is straight grain, think of the bundle of straws. In order to hollow this, I want to start from the middle and pull out. This way I'm cutting into supported fibers instead of cutting away from supported fibers, which will make my cuts cleaner. I need that tool rest a little bit lower. I'm going to use my spindle gouge like a drill. I'm going to push in and pull towards me. Push in, pull towards me. And as I'm pulling towards me, I am also turning the tool and scooping out. Okay? So I'm going to push in the center, drill in, and then pull towards me. Scoop in, drill in the center, pull towards me. Ooh, it's hot. Stop and see where we're at. And I went way deeper than I needed to go because I know as we process, I am going to be removing some of this material. I'll end up using about that much of the chuck, I think. And in case you're wondering, it's just a piece of sycamore. It is held in a Nova G3 chuck, just a standard Nova G3 chuck with the standard 2-inch jaws, a standard tenon. There is absolutely nothing fancy about any of this setup. Anybody can do this. It's very, very simple. Now, I'm not there yet. I need to go a little wider. And in order to go wider, because I'm going wider, I'm also going to go a little deeper. That'll save me some work later. See how we are now. Alright, we're getting better. I am going to grab a box scraper, because I have it. You can keep going with your spindle gouge if you want. I'm going to change up tools. I'm going to use this just to speed up the process a little bit more. also see that I'm going at an angle. I don't want to go in straight. I don't want to make this a cylinder on the inside, because as we continue through this process, this shape is going to get smaller in every dimension. Okay, even though we're saying that this is the outside diameter that we're looking for, after sanding and polishing, this is going to be a little bit smaller. So I don't want to make this a straight cylinder on the inside, because then I won't be able to make a smaller jamming chuck later on. Also, this way, if I mess up here, I don't ruin the whole thing. Alright, we're getting close. Alright, there's my center. There's my center. It's in there pretty good. That might just work. I have removed my tailstock. If I wanted to, I could put a cup center in the tailstock and bring it up for this next step. I don't want to. I'm going to try to do it without having to do that. We'll see. We'll see if this thing jumps out on me. It might. I need to go a little bit wider right here at the mouth. Back to the spindle gouge, because I'm taking less material. This is why you pull. I want a tapered fit.